Thank you so much for coming out tonight. We're so glad to be here. I can't wait to be interviewed by my close friend and colleague.
So happy to be here, everybody. This actually feels like such a special moment. When I graduated college, I actually applied to work for Sara, and I took the train all the way out to Long Island. I was living in New York at the time, and I spent the day shadowing Sara and went to meetings and met the faculty or the other fellow therapists, and Sara invited me to work for her, and I was so honored, and it was my first job out of college, and then.
But this was back when I was in the Orthodox community, sort of like dressing in a wig and
if you knew, you knew,
yeah.
You know?
Okay.
You know, so then 48 hours later, I tell Sara, I'm sorry, I can't take this job. I want to be able to say fuck and open my legs when I talk to people. And so I didn't take that job, but we've remained very special friends. So it's such an honor to be together tonight.
It was such a moment because, you know, even though you were just out of college, you were further along in your out journey. And I, for so many reasons that you'll hear about tonight, still had to masquerade and hide who I was at the time. And so you saying that, you know, it made me, like it inspired me to want to be more true and authentic.
Whew, okay. So Sara's gonna start us off. Did everyone get their book, Kissing Girls on Shabbat? I highly recommend the book and the activity, but okay, so Sara's gonna bring us in a little and tell us what this is about, and then we're gonna take it from there.
Thank you. I don't know how to top, okay. Well, I did do that, so let's talk about that. I was raised in Chassidic Brooklyn, and that's where this book begins. How many people here are familiar with like what Chassidic Borough Park may look like? Have you seen the documentaries? You can picture it. My father wore a long black coat and a fur hat. He wore the kind of pants that tucked into his socks. He was like extreme Hasidic. My mother wore a wig and long skirts and covered up to her collarbone. And our whole community looked like that, copy paste, you know, every family, we were like a post-Holocaust generation that was trying to survive in Brooklyn. I went to an all-girls school where I wore long pleated skirts, and I was raised to believe that I needed to marry a boy from the school a few blocks away that I would be set up with at like 18 or 19. And that was my mission in life. And I really, really wanted to fulfill that mission because I believed that that was my path to heaven. And they gave us some really like kind of rough images of what hell would look like if we didn't do that. You know, one of the stories I remember learning as a child was this story of a girl whose skirt was a little too short and she didn't wear stockings. And so as her punishment in hell, her skirt would be safety pinned into the flesh of her skin, and then she would be dragged around on the back of a horse until her skin bled off. You know, so I was like, I'm not gonna do that. I don't wanna go to hell, that's not cool. That does not sound like fun. So I am going to follow this path, be Orthodox, and marry a man. But then I just kept falling in love with girls. And I wrote a Modern Love New York Times column about the first girl I fell in love with at 15. And it was all like secret and hidden, you know, and I thought I could pray it away. And I could beg God and be like, you know, if I pray hard enough and I fast, maybe I just won't have those feelings anymore and I can get back on the path I'm supposed to be on. At 19, I was on my way to being set up with a boy from the school across the road or one of the other schools. And then I fell in love with a second girl. And the book begins there, with me having a secret closeted girlfriend who would creep up the carpeted stairs of my parents' home into my bedroom at night and be with me. And then when the sun came up, we would go out and date the boys we were supposed to date, or actually like have arranged little meetings with them. And so from there, so many different things have happened, and I know you have so many questions, and go
Yeah,
for it.
it's interesting because when I think about how many people are living this secret, also went to an Orthodox college. I went to Yeshiva University. Any alumni in here? There we go. And you weren't allowed to bring boys into your dorm room, but you could bring girls. And I thought it was a secret, and so I think something that makes this book so powerful is the ways that you get to learn that the thing that you were living and experiencing actually is a much bigger experience. And so to say that is, that's my story from a long time ago, and I think about how you are talking about stories that happened a long time ago, and yet this book continues to hold such relevance. And I guess I wonder, why do you think that is? Why the purpose and the stories that are in Kissing Girls on Shabbat seem to cross divide, be timeless, that they always, that the story continues to be true?
You know, I think that's such a good question. As a trauma therapist in Manhattan now, like I've gotten to this point where I get people who come into my office and are in pain. And I think so many of us are lost. The world that we live in is traumatic. There are so many crises that come at us at all different times of the day. Like you just turn on your phone, you know, and you're almost assaulted with images and news that's so difficult and painful. And I think many of us are trying to figure out, how do you live and how do you grow and thrive while your body is flooded with so many stimuli that are scary, you know, and dangerous and unsafe? And I think I know a little bit about that because I was raised in this world that felt so unsafe to me. And through this book, you get to see me fall and crash and burn. And I wouldn't say necessarily be a perfect model of someone who's thrived through trauma and crisis, but I decided to open my process up and to be real and raw and vulnerable about it in the hopes that other people could maybe draw something from that.
Yeah, I'm curious what's something that's really surprised you about the response to the book, both in the world and also maybe specifically within the Orthodox community?
There are so many things that have surprised me, even just like being introduced tonight and having my bio read. Like every single time I hear someone else say it back to me, I think to myself like, wow, that really happened. You know, because for so many years I dissociated through it and I just was like, okay, this happened, boom, like go on to the next thing. I have these kids, I have to wake up, I have to take them to the doctor, I have to live. I don't have time to think about how much this hurts. And so when the book was released in June, everyone, like I did all this media and went on tour, and then I crashed in July because I thought, like I finally realized from everyone's responses and people coming up to me and saying, we're so sorry you went through that like, damn, I went through something and it was really painful and hard. And it took me some time to recover from being seen and witnessed. I've also gotten a lot of DMs and a lot of emails from people who say, thank you for saying this. I'm not yet free to speak. I'm still hiding who I am. I had one young man reach out to me over email and say, I heard you wrote a book, and this is from inside of a Hasidic community. He said, I don't know how to get it. Can I buy it from you? And I had to direct him to you can buy it from a bookstore, and I told him where the bookstore is, and he responded with an email with a picture of himself in his long black coat, holding the book, and he said, thank you, I didn't know about Barnes & Noble. And he lives in New York, you know? And so having this book be mailed in secret packaging, downloaded on Audible, right, within communities that don't have access to this kind of content has been, I feel like it's worth it if I reached one person, you know?
Well, you've definitely reached more than one. I think about how often the stories that existed that I would read about under the covers with the flashlight were not Jewish stories, and had to place in the identity markers that felt like mirrors because those weren't written about yet. And so what does it mean to be writing this memoir and really bringing the Jewish voice into it, especially in this current moment?
Well, one is, I mean, that's why we chose the title, Kissing Girls on Shabbat. I wanted to have the queer and Jewish identities both represented in the title. And I think writing this, like bringing a Jewish voice to this, it's complicated at this time, you know. Jewish authors are not having a great time out there right now. We're not so popular. But it's also shown me how much community there still is within Judaism. I've been invited to like temples and JCCs across America, and it's shown me that, you know, I still have a home with the Jewish people. And our connection is still always going to be there.
Something you talk a lot about in the book is your relationship between Jewish ritual and spirituality and yourself. And you talk about how from a really young age you got really good at being able to monitor your thoughts, that even thinking about your gay identity became a thought to monitor. And I guess I'm wondering when it started to not be a thought that you would just monitor, but it got to be you and your identity, and when you started to notice that shift internally.
The monitoring of the thoughts is something I think we don't even think about that much when you think about being raised in a culture. I remember going to therapy like after I started leaving the community, and I was afraid to speak to my therapist about some of the things I was feeling. And I am a therapist, but I was afraid to say some words out loud, like some things that made me really angry. And I wanted to date women. And I remember like just having to do these visualizations in therapy of putting like this sort of protective wall around my thoughts so God couldn't see them, because I was raised to think that God could see and hear everything you're thinking. So it was quite like a journey to reclaim my own mind, you know. And in terms of my like gay identity, I wanted to hide it for so many years. You know, I married a man, and that didn't work out. But I thought maybe it was just him. Like, let me just try again and see if I pray hard enough, if I find another man, maybe I just like still won't be gay. So I married. I know. It seems really like on the other side of it, it's like, what were you doing? But I did. I married a second man. And he was great, and he loved me, and I actually loved him as a person. Spoiler alert, I was still gay. It doesn't work. You can't marry away the gay, you can't pray away the gay. Just, I'm your living proof. And then at some point, like, he looked at me, and he said, I think you're gay. And that was a moment of such fear. You know, all I wanted to do was take his words and shove them back into his mouth. I wanted to like tell him, you didn't just see me read a ton of lesbian erotica behind the pages of the Mishpacha magazine. You did not see like the rainbow hoodie I wear to every Shabbat lunch. Like, you didn't see the way I was crushing on my Peloton instructor, female. I just wanted to make him like wipe all that out of his mind and go back to not claiming it, you know, because that felt so much safer. But once the words were out there, I couldn't hide it anymore. And that became a moment that became like the start of my fight toward freedom.
Yeah, I feel like something I say a lot to my clients is that, you know, it's actually impossible to stay in shame when you're in connection, right? Like, shame wants you to be in isolation, but putting it in words, I remember the first time I told someone I was gay, I was like screaming, crying so hard. It felt like Moshe Rabbeinu had just parted the Red Sea. Like, it was, I couldn't believe that those words came out of my mouth. And now it's so wild to sit up here and to be having this conversation with you. But also, at one point, that really felt like that. And so, I wonder what it's like for you and what you say to people who are like, I could never leave, or I could never do what you did, or how did you do it? And at one point you felt that way, and here you are. And how do you hold both as you're receiving messages and stories like that?
Yeah, I'm sure like you get to do this too. I think we both get to be there with people in that moment of deciding whether to say the scary thing. And the truth is, what I tell people is no one can ever tell you whether you should say that scary thing out loud, right? Because each person knows what their resources are. Some people can't say the thing out loud because they need to live in their parents' home, and they won't have housing or financial support, or there may be real life consequences in terms of custody of their children. And so I would never tell someone like, just be braver, right? Because sometimes there are pragmatic consequences to saying some things. And so instead of doing that, I just say, let's hold where you are now. There's no one right answer for everybody. No one needs to come out.
My favorite line in your book actually is your dedication, where you dedicate it to your kids and say, it's always been for you. Yeah, I have chills when I think about that, but I wonder if you could talk about that, how you held that in your own struggle and moments of wanting to give up, how you held that this was for them.
For me, it does like sort of connect, because that was the thing that helped me be brave. There was a point where my children were in middle school, and they were being raised to follow the same path that I took. I don't know how many of you like remember where you were at 18 or 19 years old. Was anyone here married at that age? I mean, if you feel comfortable, you can. So we got one. I hope it went okay. Oh, okay. So still going. Should we give them a hand? Yeah. Oh. That's really beautiful, and that's so hopeful. And for so many people at 18 or 19, like, you don't know who you are, right? You're probably, going to college or deciding what you want to do with your life, thinking about what do I want as a career? Do I want to have kids? I looked at my kids, and they were 12 and 10, and I saw that they were on the path I had been on. They were going to be married off in like 6 years. And they were so young. They didn't know who they were yet. They were still figuring it out. And they actually weren't receiving the education that would even allow them to go to college. My son in 7th grade in a yeshiva, religious yeshiva, was on a 2nd grade reading level. He wouldn't have stood a chance in the world. Just I didn't want them to have to fight the way I did. Like, I had to go to college and figure out how to write an essay. Figure out what grammar was, use so many resources. So looking at them, I thought they're going to have the future that I didn't get to have. And that inspired me to start taking steps toward leaving. And I'm so glad I did. My kids are now, they're in college. They made it. They're there. Thank you. My son wants to be a pediatrician. My daughter wants to be a sex therapist. I'm like, great, join the family business. They're cool. And they're proud to be Jewish, which makes me even happier. They wear their Jewish stars out on campus. They find the Hillel, they find the Chabad, So I feel like we've managed to come out sort of intact with these connections still there.
Yeah, I feel like the other part of this book is that often as a therapist, our clients know very little about us, and that's partly how this stuff works. And I feel like you really gave your clients a whole world. And I guess I'm curious what it's looked like for you returning to the work now that your clients sit on that couch and also know so much about the chair that you're sitting in. I wonder about if they make fun of you or, bring up parts of your story in session, and what it's been like to have that object in the room, if we were going to speak clinically.
Yeah. I know it was such a hard decision for a long time. I thought because I've chosen this field, I now need to be silent. But then I looked at the clients I was working with, and I was certainly not encouraging them to be silent. That's not what I wanted for anyone in my room. And so I write a letter to the back of my clients, and it's in the back of my book. If you flip to the end, there's a personal letter to my clients explaining my clinical rationale for speaking. Returning to the office has been actually, like, I'll speak generally, because I'm so protective of the people who trust me with themselves. But I've been so pleasantly surprised. I have so many wonderful clients who've risen to the occasion. And what they've done with the book often is they've come into me and told me things they were ashamed of. They've seen me be raw and vulnerable. And so many clients have come in and said, like, here's a thing I never really wanted to say. I text on Shabbat. I once slept with a person of the same gender. I'm having doubts about my own identity. I'm having religious struggles that my wife doesn't know about. And so I feel like it's opened the door for something that's more authentic even than therapy was before.
You talk about the door that you wanted this book to open, which, yes, is about queerness and about orthodoxy, but you also write so beautifully about your sister, Shani. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the doors you were hoping that her story would open in the book.
So there's this, I don't know how many, if you haven't read the book yet, my sister Shani had bipolar disorder, and she was very, very passionate about speaking up. She published a series of articles for Aish.com about her experiences in psych units, her experience having bipolar disorder in the Chassidic community. She would have wanted me to speak. I know she would have. She spoke, and she wrote so beautifully. I hope that she's proud. I hope she is. And I don't want to spoil too much, but you'll see more about her in the book. I wanted to also unpeel the layers of stigma around mental health in so many Jewish communities. There are so many times that people wait to seek treatment because they're afraid of being labeled as crazy or sick. They're afraid of what that'll mean to their families. Having worked in an inpatient psych unit near a religious community, I noticed that, like, the more religious the family, the longer they waited to bring their family member into the unit. And so the most religious clients came in at the peak of psychotic, manic episodes of depression because of the layers of stigma. And so I hope that writing about mental illness, will help to decrease some of that.
When you think about where we are in this moment within the Jewish community, within Orthodox community, what are things that you think the Orthodox community can be doing in the here and now that feels possible, that could be inspired or built off of your story in Kissing Girls on Shabbat?
I have so much love for the community that raised me and the people who are still within it. I also work with the Orthodox community all the time, and I know how capable they are of opening their hearts because I've seen it, and I see it every single day. I started my career in 2005 in an Orthodox community when nobody talked about sexual abuse. Nobody. And the Orthodox community now has entire organizations like nonprofits that are funded to help people recognize early signs of sexual abuse. And so I know we can get there. I think they're a little behind, maybe because I still identify partially as related to the Orthodox community. But what I think every individual can do is just open their heart, just listen, learn. Follow me on social media. You'll see all of it.
I guess something I also hear is the openness also has to come along with the unlearning of so much of what you've been taught and figuring out what's mine, what resonates, what allows me to be myself in the world. And I guess I'm curious if you could share more about your process of unlearning and what that's looked like and what that continues to look like.
You're asking so many easy questions today. Just the unlearning. Yeah, so the Judaism I was raised with was so harsh, right? It was so like, do this and you like burn in the cauldrons of a fiery pit of hell. Do this other thing and then you go to the garden of heaven. And so I've had to unlearn a lot of black and white thinking and like relearn humanity and process where it's like, or you can just have a day and try to be the best you can be today and take away so much of the judgment.
Yeah, I wonder also about pieces that you hope to never unlearn, the pieces that like stay in your soul, that keep you warm and feel very sweet when you think about.
I think just having this sense of mission, I was raised to believe that life should be purposeful. You should do something with your life that means something. I love that. I think I would be lost without that. And so I always want to hold on to the sense of like a greater purpose and mission. And I really like gefilte fish still. And some of the foods, like we do holidays at home. We do them differently now. My daughter just texted me today, what are we doing for Hanukkah this year? Because some years we do like 3 nights of donuts and 1 night of latkes, and some years we do 8 days of presents, but we get to decide and choose and like celebrate in ways that feel good for us. I never want to lose that connection.
Yeah, I think that so much of that connection and rebuilding is complicated, and a lot of it can be connected to a relationship with God. And something I often think about is just like, God is obsessed with me, like so obsessed, like so thrilled by the life that I'm living. And I guess I'm curious about how you think about God at this point in your life and what that shift or journey has been like.
I think God is obsessed with you. You're doing so much important work.
Thank you so much.
It's, for a long time I wanted nothing to do with God. I felt like I needed to pray to something at some times when I was really lost, and I felt like I was just talking into the void. And I'll talk about this in book 2. Like my second book will explore what happened after I left. I know America loves a before and after. We love to see you were all like closed up in your wig and skirt, and look at you now, you're successful. But there is a messy middle. There is so much pain and healing from trauma, and for me, it was really messy. And so I explored that in book 2, and part of that was, for me, developing an addiction. And I hope to find compassion for myself when I write about that. But you'll see it, the raw and the messy, because that's how I like to write. I think that's impactful. I don't hold back. I've been sober for a little while now, and so that's allowed me to find another sort of connection to the idea of a higher power and to the idea of community of sorts. And I'm no longer resistant to the idea of a God, and I think we get to create the God that we need on a given day. We can do that. Maybe God is non-binary. Maybe God is a circle of queer people sitting there just saying, you're doing great. You're doing amazing. Maybe God is obsessed with us. I don't know, but I'm not resistant to it anymore, and that's helpful.
I highly recommend thinking God is obsessed with you. It really improves your quality of life immensely. I'm curious what your hope is for the little Hasidic girl that finds this book, and whether she knows why she's picked it up or why they've picked it up. I'm curious, like, what's your hope?
I actually had someone reach out to me the other day, and she said, I'm about to be forced into a marriage with someone she had met a couple of times. And she said, I just found your book, and this is the first time I feel hope. So my hope is that that little Hasidic girl will hear someone say, did you hear about that crazy therapist that wrote a horrible book? And she'll know to go find it and seek it out. Because she won't find it in Eichler's on 13th Avenue. She won't find it in the Jewish bookstore, but she'll need to hear people say that. And I hope that she reads it or listens to it and knows that there is a world out there that's so much more vast, where there's so much possibility. I hope it expands her ability to dream. I didn't realize back when I was in the community how limited my dreams were. I didn't even know what I was allowed to wish for. I knew I had to marry a man, so I remember wishing, I hope he's slightly smaller or shorter than me so I don't feel scared. That was my dream. I was like, or maybe I hope he has blue eyes so my kids have blue eyes because I liked blue eyes. I didn't know I was allowed to dream of the life I have now, you know? And so I hope that people who read this, no matter what kind of closet they're in, know that they are allowed to dream bigger than they may even know to imagine.
Something I remember, this idea that I'm really going to date my religious upbringing for a minute, but that they would teach us in seminary was that when you were feeling really tested to do something that was against halacha, that you should imagine all your kids in Shemayim, in heaven, like sitting up there being like, go mom, like, so that you don't do the thing. And I guess that memory has always felt kind of complicated for me, but in this moment I just think about like all those Hasidic children that are like finding this book and they're just like, go doctor, go. And so I think you've actually, you've given us all such a gift.
Thank you. We'll take any questions. I know people sometimes think like you're a doctor. Don't be respectful. Like just ask anything. It's okay.
How did your parents react? And the reason I ask that, I have a very good friend who's gay, and his parents disowned him.
I'll give you an honest answer, you know, because what am I doing if I'm not going to be honest? You'll see that I have a complicated relationship with my mother in the book. My mother didn't take it well. I think she's from a post-Holocaust generation. She was born in a DP camp in Germany in 1946. I don't even fault her for her fear around my current identity. So we're not in communication. My father, I did get to talk with a few years after I came out of the closet in the community. And I started telling him a little bit about my life. He lives in Israel now. And he said, he's a Hasidic man, remember, big black hat, black coat, still full beard, lives in Hasidic Jerusalem. He said, what did I ever do wrong as a parent that you felt you couldn't tell me? You know, and so there's hope. Like there's more hope than one might think.
You mentioned there's a lack of media, obviously, in the Orthodox community. I wonder if any of them, and what their reaction has been, if any of them have actually been able to read the book.
Within the community? Mm-hmm. You know, what's so great about the time that we live in is that people can sneak tiny devices into their bedrooms, into their backpacks, and so many people have fake, you know, social media profiles without their names and have found the book and have found me. So many that I'm actually doing a forum for like people who are within the community on Sunday evening with another Jewish queer person who's ex-Hasidic to answer questions for all the people who are reaching out to us both from within.
Any other questions?
There are a couple of.
How did your kids respond to the news and also the book?
That's a great question. So my kids were really proud that I decided to write the book. They got advance copies and they got to read it. My daughter started reading and said, Mom, there's some awkward like scenes in here where you're doing some like sexual, so I had to like go and cross out the sex scenes from her advance copy. I went to visit her in college this weekend, and she had the advanced copy with the crossed out sex scenes that was being passed around her dorm. So all her friends wanted to read it. And then as she was reading, she kept popping out of her room to tell me different things. So at one point she said, "You had a pink Coach bag, where is it?" And I was like, "Jordan, that was 2009, you know? I don't have it." And then she goes, "Okay, shh, don't spoil anything." And I sat with both kids and I said, like, spoiler alert, we survived. You're here. You're going to college. You know, we made it. My son cried reading the beginning part of the book. He felt the pain, you know, and he was appreciative that us going through our journey could be shared with so many people, and he hoped that it could help other people avoid, you know, similar circumstances. As to coming out of the closet, I came out of the closet, like I told my children I was gay right after we moved to the city, sort of like after the end of the book. And my daughter, she goes, "That explains your Netflix history." I was like, "I didn't know you were logging into my Netflix profile." And it just put my son was like, "Oh, is that why the divorce has happened?" You know? And so it was right. And it like helped them put the pieces together. For so many parents, we think we're protecting our children when we hide things from them. Difficult truths. We don't want to tell them, you know, your parents are having struggles. We don't want to tell them there's a financial problem. We don't want to tell them someone's sick. But kids feel the secrets, and it eats them up inside. And as a therapist, I treat so many kids who have secrets in their families. And so I'm a strong believer in like telling kids a version of the truth that they can handle so that they can then put their lives in context, you know, and move forward with the truth.
Okay. Wow. I have this whole thing to say. I'm speechless, though, so bye. I don't even know. Can't. Thank you. That was a tough story, but fabulous, and thank you so much. In a few minutes, everyone can go to the back. Oh. Okay, so I'm sorry. So.
You have a question?
Follow up on the question about the kids. When the time came to leave the community, did the kids resist in some ways leaving the community because it was the only thing they knew at that point in their lives?
So I would not have left if they resisted. You know, I don't think I would have, because like as I said in the dedication, I did this for them. They were suffering within the community. It was really hard for them to try to fit themselves into boxes. My son was coming home from school, like saying that his teacher told him that if he listens to non-Jewish music, his soul will burn in a pot of oil. I'm like, you know, and he was like, he said to me, "I know it's not true, but why do I have to hear this?" And my daughter was being told that having boy babies would be more valuable than having girl babies. And she was 11. And she said, like, "Did you feel worse having me than Victor because I was a girl baby?" You know? So they were struggling. And I guess maybe because their mom is more of an open thinker and always was, even when I looked religious, they were sort of questioning more. And so there was no resistance. They were so relieved. They were just so relieved. And we left to another, like to a modern Jewish, you know, like a progressive Jewish day school in Manhattan where they can learn the kind of Judaism that would feel more supportive and warm.
Sorry, I missed a bunch of people. Anyone else? Someone up here? Paul?
How does their father feel, the father of your kids? How does he take the whole thing in? And does he see the kids?
So there's actually some about that toward the end of the book. I did have to face a legal battle in order to bring us all to freedom. It's really hard to leave a very Hasidic, ultra-Orthodox community with one's children because the community has so many resources and they tend to put that behind lawyers. And so when somebody wants to leave, they have these ways of fighting to keep the kids within. And so that was part of why it took me that amount of time. It took me 10 years after leaving my husband to leave the community because I was afraid of that backlash. And it took 10 years for me to get my PhD and develop the financial resources I needed to hire a team of attorneys, and face the legal battle I've been dreading my entire adult life up until that point. So that tension will be there in the last third of the book. You'll get to see some of that. I will say though, it has come such a long way since then. My children's father has, I'm just so glad that he has accepted them the way they are. They're no longer religious. My daughter wears pants. We all three have a matching tattoo, myself and my kids, that says Ziskite, sweetheart, in Yiddish. And he has just decided he's going to love his kids with all of that.